Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the BSV Sunday Dhamma talk. This morning we have Bhante Joe, who's here. And Bhante Joe is here providing us these teachings through a partnership that we've established between the Metta Centre and the Buddhist Society of Victoria. So we're very grateful to the Metta Centre as well as Bhante. So a bit about Bhante. He was born in London, Ontario in 1983. Bhante initially pursued interests in business and computers. And there was a chance encounter with a book on world religions in high school that led him to the Four Noble Truths, sparking a deep spiritual transformation. He began training at Toronto Zen Buddhist Temple during high school and university, eventually moving in and committing to full-time priest training in 2006. Drawn to Theravada Buddhism, he attended a retreat with Ajanh Viradhammo in 2007 and discovered the Tisaraṇa Buddhist Monastery. He became an anagārika in 2008 and was ordained as a bhikkhu in 2010 under Ajanh Viradhammo. Bhante Joe trained at the Tisaraṇa and spent a year in Thailand before being released from dependence in 2015. That sounds very intriguing. You'll have to explain what that means, Bhante. After a brief stay in California, he returned to Toronto, engaging with local temples until 2019. In November 2019, he relocated to Sri Lanka, where he continues his monastic life. We're very grateful, as I mentioned, to Bhante as he has made himself available over the 3 days. So yesterday he offered us a meditation here, a retreat for the entire day, and today he's offering the Dhamma talk, and tomorrow night he's offering the guided meditation. So thank you very much, Bhante, and please make him feel welcome. Thank you.
Wonderful to be here.
Now pass it to Savitri to request the precepts and refuges.
Mayam Bhante, Tisaraṇena saha pancha sīlāni yācāma. Dutiyampi Mayam Bhante, Tisaraṇena saha pancha sīlāni yācāma. Tatiyampi Mayam Bhante, Tisaraṇena saha pancha sīlāni yācāma.
So please repeat after me. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so please repeat after me. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tisaraṇa gamanaṃ sampurnaṃ. Pānati pāta veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Kāmesu micchāchara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Musāvāda veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Sura meraya majja pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Please repeat after me. Imani pancha sikapadani samadhiyami. Imani pancha sikapadani samadhiyami. Imani pancha sikapadani samadhiyami. So I'll just repeat this part to wish everybody well. Silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibuting yanti, tasma silang visodaye. So sadhu. So that means virtue is the source of happiness, virtue is the source of true wealth, virtue is the source of purity, I believe, therefore let virtue be purified. So now we'll chant Itipiso, I believe. Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijja Charana Sampanno Sugato Lokavidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Satta Deva Manusanang Buddho Bhagavati Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipassiko Panaiko Pachatang Veditambo Vinyuhiti Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Ujupatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Nyaya Patipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Samichi Patipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Yadidang Chattari Purisa Yugani Atta Purisa Pungala Esa Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Takineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Punya Ketang Lokasati Karaniya Matta Kusalena Yantang Santang Padang Abhisame Chasako Uju Chasu Acho Chasamudu Anatimani Santu Sako Chasubaro Cha Apakicho Chasallahu Kavuti Santin Trio Cha Nipako Cha Apagambo Kulesu Ananugin Nachakudang samachare kinchiyena vinyu pare yupawadeyung sukino wa kemino hontu sambe satta bhavantu sukitata ye kechipana bhutati tasawa tawarawa navase sadika Vaye Mahantava Majjimara Sakanukatula Ditta Vaye Vaditta Ye Chadure Vasanti Avidure Bhutava Sambhave Siva Sambe Satta Bhavantu Sukitata Naparo Parang Nikupetana Timanyeta Katachinang Kanchibhyarosana Patiga Sanya Nanyamanya Sadukamicheyamata Yataniyang Puttang Ayusa Eka Puttamanurake Evampi Sambhabhute Sumana Sangbhavaye Aparimana Metancha Sambhalo Kasming Manasang Bhavaye Aparimanang Uddhang Adocha Tiriyancha Sambadang Averang Asapatang Titan Charang Nisinno sayano ayawatassa vigatamindo etang sating aditeya brahmametang viharang idamahuditincha anupagamma silava tasanena sampanno kame suvineya getang nahijatu gamba seyang punaretiti. Good. So, give a Dhamma talk for about 45 minutes. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So very nice to be here in Melbourne. It's my first visit here and my second visit to Australia. And being from North America, you can't help to make a little bit of a comparison. And Sydney has kind of like a West Coast feel, if I was to compare it to North America. And here in Melbourne feels a little bit like the East Coast, which is where I'm from. Kind of, it was snowing a little bit in Newbury Monastery. I felt right at home. So years ago when I was a young man, I was in university, as Sri just mentioned. And at university, there was this young fellow who had the chance to go on a trip. So I'm on a trip now. I had the chance to go and travel. He went to South America for a leadership conference, and he came back. And he said, one of the interesting things, the thing that I really learned on this trip was wherever you go, that like essence of who you are, that's something that you keep. You have that wherever you go. Wherever it is that you go, you've really got that essence of who you are. And at the time, I was already a Buddhist, so I was thinking, well, I don't know how true that is, your essence of who you are. But what people search for, what they often look for, is a place of safety, something that they can take with them wherever they go, that will be stable, and that they can hold on to, something that they won't lose, and something that's really theirs. So the Buddha has a lot of teachings on this, and oftentimes they're taken to be like the creme de la creme, like the highest teachings are the Buddha's teachings on the self, and kind of what we do, and that there's no self actually in anything. There's absolutely no self. One of the interesting things is that the way that Buddhism evolved is that around the 4th century AD in Sri Lanka, there was a kind of split between the monks who study and the monks who practice. And there was a bit of a debate. The monks who practice lost. The monks who study won. Because, if you study a lot, you're going to be a better debater, really. Than meditators are not always the best debaters. This was the culmination of a process that had been going on since shortly after the Buddha's time, in which the Buddha's teachings started to be interpreted less and less about what was inside and more about what was outside. So the process started probably with what we now call the commentaries and evolved into the Abhidhammas, about which there's like about 18 different competing schools back in the days. And all of them had different Abhidhammas. So the Abhidhamma that we have now is called the Vibhajyavada Abhidhamma. And it was one of like 18. And they all compete with each other. They all had different versions of wording things. And it was very interesting to the people at the time. There were like kings who would moderate these debates that people would have. And if you won the debate, you would get, royal patronage or patronage from really rich people. So there was this impetus, there was this push to develop new doctrines, to develop new ways of looking at the Buddhist teachings that were interesting. Okay? And what's more interesting than what's really real outside? Yeah? What is it that's outside that's really real? So oftentimes still when we come to the Buddhist teachings, or we think about what the ultimate, the highest level of the Buddhist teachings are, we think if we really practice, we're going to get an experience of ultimate reality, what reality really is. And when we see what reality really is, then we'll be free as a result of this experience. One of the really interesting things is that when we go back to the Pali Canon, what we see in the Pali Canon is what people might perceive as a lot of gaps. There's things in the Pali Canon that the Buddha just doesn't explain. So there was this time, I think I mentioned this yesterday, the Buddha was walking through a forest, and the forest was a Simsapa forest. And Simsapa trees, they have these leaves that are about the size of little tiny dimes. So he picked up a handful of these Simsapa leaves and he said, "What's greater, monks, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the trees overhead?" And the monk said, "Well, of course, the leaves in the trees overhead are greater. The leaves in your hand are much less." And the Buddha said, "In the same way, the things that I've known through direct knowledge are far greater. The things that I've actually taught are less." Why is that? Because they don't lead to the ending of suffering. So when we go back and look at philosophy, it's an interesting thing. Many of us here have been educated in a Western cultural background. People coming from an education system that's in an Asian cultural background won't have that exact same bias. But the Western education system is based on Greek philosophy, largely. Greeks were the premier philosophers in the West. Actually, they were almost contemporary with the Buddha. And what Western philosophy got really concerned with was the I. Is what we really see real? You know, is it really real outside? Like, is the wall real? Is the tree real? It was concerned with the I and the way that we perceive. Now, Indian philosophy coming from the Buddha had a totally different way of focusing. It was focused on getting a stable source of food, on getting enough to eat. So the lens through which these two philosophies looked at the world was really different. And the lens through which the Buddha taught was through the Indian lens. So his teachings were not about trying to find an ultimate reality or a true source of self or whatever it might be. They were about finding an end to suffering. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we feed, the way that we take things on. So when we think about the self, typically, especially in the Western context, about the I or whatever it might be, it was mainly about something that's permanent that really exists. Well, the Buddha often sidesteps these questions. And when you look about how he teaches about what the self is, he teaches about it as a process. So this process is called ahankara mamankara. And ahankara mamankara means I-making and my-making. So in other words, in the Buddha's teachings, the self or not self is not about what really exists, doesn't exist. It's about something that we do to create who we are. It's about something that we hold to create who we are. So there's this really interesting phrase in the canon, which is that for there to be a self, there has to be the possessions of a self. So in other words, in order for us to be who we are, in order for us to have that essence that we take with us when we travel to Sydney, travel to Melbourne, travel to Sri Lanka, travel to South America, we have to have a characteristic to it. We have to have some kind of things by which we can define who we are, either explicitly or implicitly. So I have these friends that I've had since childhood almost. Since childhood. So my oldest friend we met when we were 4 years old, kind of playing in the playground. We don't hang out as much anymore, obviously, because I'm a monk. He's still up to the same stuff that we were up to when I was a teenager. So that places limits on what we can do to hang out together. But when I go back to Canada, sometimes they come to visit for, a couple hours or something like that. How are you doing? They've got kids and, stop by and say hello. And one time they left and my mother said, yeah, it's interesting. They're all grown now. They have kids, they're 40 years old, but you can still see that little spark of who they are, who they were when they were a kid. So oftentimes we take our personality as something that we can rely on, as something that's stable, and as something that we can take with us wherever we go. Now, the trouble with this is that in order to have a personality, we have to have characteristics. You don't just think of your personality like it's just something blank, right? Like, what's that guy like? Oh, he's funny. Or what's that girl like? Oh, she's smart. What are they like? And you think of a characteristic that they have. So these characteristics are things that we create, that we bring into the being in the Buddha's teachings through clinging, through what we grab onto and what we feed on. So it's a really interesting word in the Pali language. This word is upadana. Upadana means clinging. It's right there in dependent origination. But one of the interesting things about this word is that it doesn't just mean clinging, it means sustenance. So not only do you grab onto something, in grabbing onto it, you're sustained by what you grab onto. You're supported by what you grab onto. And this support is the creation of a sense of self. It's a creation of who we are. It's the creation of our personality. And by extension, it's the creation of our world, the world that we live in, whether it's happy or whether it's not happy. Now, the Buddha gives this teaching on dependent co-arising, and this is one of the teachings, dependent origination, it's often translated as. This is one of the teachings which people often take as a description of actually what reality is like. So I remember when I was at the Zen Temple years ago, I was studying this kind of book on early Buddhism, or it was a book which detailed the various Buddhist traditions. And I was studying Theravada Buddhism at the time. And I came across this teaching on dependent origination. And I was trying to think of it. It's like, oh, well, how does this actually apply if I walk into a room? And I was trying to go through the links in dependent co-arising. Okay, I'm walking into the room. What's happening? Is there sankhara? Is there, what's going on? Is there feeling? Wait a minute. What if feeling was already there before I came into the room? And I was trying to think my way through how this could be a description of how reality really worked. And the conclusion that I came to at the time was, I think the 5 aggregates are actually a better way for me to describe reality than dependent co-arising. One of the reasons for this is because I was looking at it through the lens of trying to find a description of objective reality. But what the Buddha is describing in dependent origination is not meant to be a description wholesale of how the world works. It's a description of how we cause ourselves to suffer, or conversely, how we cause ourselves to be happy. And as a result, we're reborn. So within that whole 12 links of dependent origination, dependent co-arising, there's one section, I read a sutta on it once, but I haven't been able to find it since. I kind of just skimmed through, in which the Buddha says this applies in this life. And that is the section in which we have contact. Somebody says something to us, we get praised, we get blamed, we get money, we lose money. Get food, we lose food. We feel good, we feel bad. We are contacted by something outside. Whatever it might be, even an idea is a contact from an outside. As a result of contact, we have a feeling. Either it feels kind of good or feels kind of bad. And you can encompass pretty much any feeling under this. Like actually we were talking about this yesterday. So like a feeling of anger, it's got the tone to it, like what it actually feels like to be angry. Then overlaid on top of that feeling, you've got the perceptions that are generating and contributing to the feeling. I'm angry. Oh, why is that? Because this guy did this to me, or this girl did that to me. I'm angry. And you think about all these things that this person did, or have an imagination, you build this world. You've got these perceptions overlaying the feeling. But first, you get a contact, you have a feeling, independent origination, a feeling tone. As a result of that feeling, you get craving. Either you like it, you don't like it, whatever it might be. And you crave either to have it or not to have it. And as a result of that craving, you get clinging. And clinging is where we sustain ourselves. I kind of go on a trip to Sydney, to Melbourne, see a beach. Oh, it's a nice beach. I like it here. This is pretty good. There's clinging involved in that. On a subtle level or on a gross level, we have clinging. And we're sustained by this. We create a sense of identity based on our clinging. Now I've got a characteristic. I'm somebody who likes Sydney, right? Or I come to Melbourne. Oh, it's nice to see the snow here. It's good. Went up to Newbury, saw some kangaroos. I'm happy about that. I have a certain amount of clinging to my experience in Melbourne, to my time in Melbourne, and also to my identity in Canada. Oh, this is like the East Coast. Now, as a result of that clinging, I'm sustained by these ideas, and there's becoming there. I become a person who's from Canada. I become a person who likes Melbourne. I become a person who likes Sydney. And as a result of this becoming, I have a sense of self. That is who I am. And the more I do this in a particular way, the more entrenched it becomes in my body and mind. The more it becomes a habit. So we can think of the body and we can think of the mind as we perceive them, not as these static entities, but as things that are almost like, the flow of rivers, say. The more that a river flows over the land, the deeper the groove that it cuts. It cuts a deeper and deeper groove. And the more water that comes, the more that it can flow. It becomes much easier for things to flow to that channel. And then sometimes, wherever it rains, it slopes and bends and inclines towards that channel that's been created. And as a result, it seems very stable because the conditions that we've used, the conditions that exist, have put it together in such a way that it's difficult for that to go to another channel and start a new river. So every time that we act, every time that we think, every time we intend something, there's a process that occurs, a process of causality. And this causality is what the Buddha is describing in dependent origination. Now, if we create our sense of self out of knowledge, then it leads us to happiness. And you can see people like this. And they go places, they're happy. They go another place, they're happy. You see another person, very, very rich, very good circumstances, and they're unhappy. I mean, they're sad with those circumstances. So in that sense, wherever a person goes, they take who they are. They take what they created. Now, all this may sound a little bit complicated and it's working out, but what it means is very good news for us. It means that if we want to, we can create a self that is happy. We can create a self that is easeful, and we can create a world by extension, which is a good place to live in, which we like to live in, which is a place that's easeful, that we can stay without difficulty. So there's this very interesting phrase in the canon. There's all these teachings on not self, which sometimes interpreted as no self. Then there's this teaching that the self is the mainstay, or your own self is your mainstay, essentially. For who else could your mainstay be? I'm just paraphrasing. Having cultivated basically a stable self, a good self, you gain a refuge, you gain a mainstay that's hard to lose. So what this means for all of us is that because we're in control of our intentions, we can develop them in such a way that wherever we go, whatever we do, our personality is such that it reacts to the world well. So I've been giving this kind of meditation course recently. And the most popular parts of the course actually are these parts where you're talking about, some of the little bit kind of interesting things about meditation, like a meditation technique or a meditation topic, how to apply it, and what can happen when you do, right? That's the really interesting part of the course to people. And then on the fourth week, it's actually the Buddha's teachings to lay people, his teachings about how lay people should practice. And that one is often the least interesting part of the course to people. Sometimes less people come for that session and then more come for the last one, which is the higher goals of meditation. But the Buddha's teachings to lay people are things that one has to very carefully consider if one doesn't have the time to practice full time. Because what one does during the day, how one creates a sense of self as a layperson, is largely bound up with how one interacts with other people, how a person relates to other people and how they relate to them. So in Canada, and here in Australia, the speed limits are much more strict. I noticed that they have these kind of like speed cameras. You kind of go too fast, they'll take a photo of you with their phone. In Canada, they tried that many years ago, but people took them to court, and so the government had to back off. But I think the court decision went a different way here. So in Canada or Australia, more here, if there's a speed limit, you can't really go beyond it. I mean, if you go beyond it, you can get a ticket. Here is more likely than Canada, you'll get the ticket. And so what that means is that if you've got a Toyota, there's a maximum speed you can go. If you've got a Mercedes-Benz, maximum speed you can go. And for anybody who's been in both a Toyota or a Mercedes-Benz, I mean, they're not that different, really. Like in a country like Australia, a country like Canada, I mean, they're kind of the same. Actually, sometimes I find the seats, like my uncle had this BMW, and it was like this really low to the ground car, kind of like this roadster, it looked really cool and fast. It was really uncomfortable. You get in this thing and you're like leaning back, and every little rock that this car hit, you could feel it, like boom, boom, kind of riding in this sports car. I was like, maybe it'd be nice to have a Toyota now, kind of better shock absorption. So the difference between these two cars in terms of their comfort, in terms of their utility, in a country like Canada, a country like Australia, is not that great. But what is very different is the way that people treat you when you drive a Mercedes-Benz versus you drive a Toyota. Hop out at the gas station with your Mercedes-Benz, the guy or the girl, whoever's filling the tank may treat you different. The people at the counter may treat you different. The people at events that you pull up to may treat you different because of your Mercedes-Benz. And as a result, people desire this Mercedes-Benz. So one of the hidden elements in the way that we create a sense of self, if we are especially not a full-time practicing monastic, but even if we are a practicing monastic, is through our relationships with other people, through how people relate to us and how we perceive their relationship to us. So the Buddha's teachings on not self take a very practical turn. Now, we don't just think about this to, again, discover an ultimate reality. His teachings on not self are never called like a mark or a lakkhana of reality. They're called a perception. He calls them anatta sanya. You never see anatta lakkhana. Lakkhana means mark. It occurs nowhere in the Pali Canon. In other words, this again comes back to what we do, and we can use the teachings of the Buddha on not self to stop ourselves from suffering. So as a monk, I was meeting with Ajahn Viradhammo the other day at Newbury Monastery. And one of the things that he said, he's like, yeah, as monks, we do a lot of counseling. I had the chance to interview him about his practice and about his takes on meditation. This is what he said. And when you listen to people, you do counseling with them, a lot of where their joy comes from is other people. A lot of where their suffering comes from is other people. And the relationship that those other people have to their happiness, to what they cling to, and what they use to make up who they are. So the Buddha's teachings on this are really, really interesting when it comes to his teachings to lay people. He doesn't give this teaching like, okay, discover an ultimate reality. What he says is that whoever you interact with as a lay person, you have to determine what that relationship is and then behave appropriately according to that relationship. So if you got parents, you behave differently than when you're with your boss. If you have a teacher, you behave differently than you do when you're with your employees. And each of these relationships actually has mutual responsibilities. So what it means is that a person's relationships with other people are not something in which they can carry their personality from one place to another place to another place. Depending on where they go, they have to change their personality and they have to change who they are. Now, there's a lot of paradoxes in this. Actually, I have a friend, one of my friends from Canada. He when we were young, he was kind of like a shorter guy and, not tall, not really buff or anything like that. And so he wasn't like, people categorize and put people into hierarchies naturally as humans. So, it wasn't like at the top of the high school hierarchy where like, all the girls were trying to date him and all the people were inviting him to parties necessarily. He went to a lot of parties. But it wasn't like, the classic football coach captain or the football captain or the captain of the basketball team. Then later, as we got older, he started this painting business. And his painting business became very successful. In Canada, there's a shortage of skilled tradespeople. So they actually make a lot of money, sometimes more money than you would make if you have a degree. And so as a result, he developed this identity that I'm, the successful painting business owner. And wherever he goes, whatever he does, he behaves like a painting business owner. Comes and talks to me. I'm a monk. He's like the painting business owner. He goes and talks to his mother. He's the painting business owner. He's at his painting business. He's the painting business owner. And wherever he goes, he's the painting business owner. And as a result, who he thinks he is and what his world is becomes more and more solid. It becomes something that he rests his weight of his happiness on more and more and more. Now, as a monk, when you discuss with people where their suffering is coming from, it might be something like their job. It might be something like, their family member is suffering. It might be something like their relationship is broken up. And in all of these cases, what they've done is they've rested the weight of their happiness on this other thing. and on the values that other people give to it and that they take on. So when a person learns to go through with their relationships and change the hats that they have, change the way that they act towards their mother, their father, and almost change their personality depending on who they're interacting with, what that is an application of the Buddhist teachings of not self. And the more that a person can balance in this way, what they find is that the less the world affects them. And that's where the paradox is. That's where the paradox lies. If we want to have good relationships with other people that are sustaining, that are nourishing, we can't be sustained by them. We have to place our weight on what's appropriate at that time, which means that we place our weight more and more on the Dhamma. We place our weight more and more on the Buddhist teachings, on what he said was good to do. An aspect of renunciation is really important in this as well, in the way that we build our sense of self with other people. One of the things that causes people to suffer a lot is when they feel a great deal of affection, a great deal of clinging to another person, and that person starts to move away from them. Okay, everybody's seen this happen. Kind of really like a person in your life, and so you think, I'm going to be really kind to them. I'm going to be really nice to them. I'm going to give them more. But the more you give, the further they recede away from you. The less you're able to grab onto them, and the more you have to give to keep them there. So originally the relationship was +1 +1. They pull away, now you've got to give 2. They pull away, now you've got to give 3, and now they're at +3, you're at -3. So that is not a sustainable relationship. So no matter how much we think about the ultimate reality of not self, where it hits the ground is if something like this is happening, and we can think to ourselves, this person doesn't want to be around me. It's time for me to let them go their own way. And here another paradox lies, and this is a paradox of renunciation, which is that sometimes to gain what we want, we have to let go of the things that we have. And so what we'll find in this more banal example is that sometimes when people pull away like this, they do things to us that are not the best, and we show them through our actions, it's fine if you go away. They don't message you for 2 days. The next time, you don't message them for 2 days, right? They don't message you for 3 days. Next time, you don't message them for 3 days. What sometimes happens after that is that they come running back, and they show you through their actions that they want to re-engage with you. So another paradox of our relationships with other people and the way that we build our sense of self is that if we want to be confident, we have to be prepared to let go of people that we care about. We have to be prepared to let go when they show that they no longer want to be around us. Now, all of these paradoxes come together in a sense in the Buddhist teachings that the self is its own mainstay. Because here what we're doing when we develop our minds and our ability to interact with the world in this way is we're creating a sense of self that depends less and less on the values of the world, less and less on the things of the world, and more on what gives us happiness, what gives us peace internally. And this also applies to the way that we relate to other people, to the way that we cling to them, to the way that we feed off of their views, off of their opinions. So when we manage these things well, the sense that we have is that if another person praises our Mercedes-Benz, it's not necessarily bad to have a Mercedes-Benz. I mean, if you can afford it, you can buy one. And I mean, if you like the really low cars that bump a lot, then I'm not trying to stop anybody from driving them. But the thing is, the way that a person creates a sense of identity around those, and the more that a person can balance their relationships in these ways, that they can let go of people who want to depart from them, that they can navigate the world, almost like a surfer. They got these surfers here in Australia, kind of like balancing on the board, the less it affects us when a person criticizes our Mercedes-Benz, right? The less it affects us when a person praises our sweater. Actually, my robe got criticized the other day. I dyed it with tea. Came out looking a little bit light colored. And this one monastic said, "You need a new robe, Bhante," kind of criticizing my robe. I mean, as a monk, I don't really know that person very well. And so their opinion doesn't have much of an effect on me. And the less that we rely on other people, the less that we care about their opinions, in the sense that we rest our happiness on it and build our identity on it, the less what they say, the less what they do affects us negatively. And this means that we become more and more untouchable, less and less able to be affected by the ways of the world. And so navigating these very banal things is important. The Buddha also talks about money. If you are a layperson, he recommends being free from debt. He recommends not spending more than you earn. Now, these are things which also seem very banal. People don't want to think about it. Financial management. Also, monks, I'm not a financial manager. But if you don't have debt towards anybody, one of the things that brings a lot of suffering into lay people's lives is fear of losing their job, fear of what their boss says. If you don't owe anybody anything, then their ability to affect you through money is greatly reduced. It's greatly eliminated. And as a result, you become more independent. So your ability to cling to the right things in the world and create the right sense of self can make you less and less affected. Now, in order to get these types of happiness, there's another principle there, which is a paradox, which is that if you want to get happiness, you sometimes have to let go of types of happiness that you're used to, that you enjoy consuming. And so, remember when I was a young man, I kind of gave this example yesterday. I used to like to go to the gym and work out and lift weights and these things. People like to do that. And if you want to get good at lifting weights, if you want to get good at working out, you have to give up eating certain types of food. And you have to give up certain types of things like smoking and kind of partying or whatever it might be. Because if you do those things and you go to work out, your workouts aren't going to be that effective. So I remember it was a time when all my friends, they got to smoking marijuana. I don't think it's legal here in Australia. It became legal in Canada. So marijuana is now legal in Canada. Before, when I was young, it was like this drug. Now it's almost maybe like a herb. Maybe in the future it'll be a spice that people add to their food. I don't know. But it's now legal in Canada. And there was a time when I was a young man, I started to smoke it a lot with my friends. And I noticed that after I started to smoke this marijuana, that I couldn't run. And I used to really love running. I'd go for these long runs. And smoking marijuana, you try to run, you start coughing. So there was this time that I determined to myself, like, look, I've got to give this up. It's something that's really damaging to my life. So I just determined that I would start sprinting down the hill every single day and then sprinting up it. There was this hill outside my mother's house. No matter what, even if I smoked marijuana, I would sprint up and down this hill. So things were going all right. There'd be these times when I was able to resist it and times when I wasn't. And then one time I sprinted down this hill and sprinted back up and relapsed and ended up smoking marijuana. And I got this terrible lung infection that lasted for a long time, like 4 or 5 days. At the end of that lung infection, there was this kind of thought that came into my head. It was like, oh, marijuana makes you sick. After that, the addiction basically lost its power. And I only smoked marijuana, I think, one more time in my life, and that was it for the addiction. So in order to have a higher level of happiness, we have to give up lower levels of happiness. And the Buddha teaches this in a way that's stepwise. So in learning to give up lower levels of becoming, lower levels of self, we have to create a sense of self based on things that are higher, based on things that are more stable, based on things in which we'll become less and less affected by the world. And this is what it means more and more, that our self becomes our mainstay. Our self becomes what we can rely on. So again, when I first came to Buddhism, I found that when I started to practice meditation, I got much better at things. It's kind of like much easier to study. It's kind of, my relationships improved for a while. I was kind of able to speak to people in a way that was less inhibited, that was more in line if I meditated. It was kind of going very well in that way. I kind of, okay, yeah, this is great. It enhances my worldly life. And kind of studying was going better, relationships were going better, working out was going better, everything was going better as a result of meditation. So I kept practicing meditation, was gaining happiness from practicing meditation and from chanting these kind of things. And it just kept going further. I was going on a retreat, then another retreat, then another retreat. And I actually ended up moving into this Zen temple where I eventually took up full-time training as a priest. Then this time came when I went on this Zen retreat. And after this Zen retreat, again, this word or this kind of realization popped into my head. It was like, you're getting more happiness from practicing meditation than you are from your worldly life. So in other words, at first, meditation was a supplement that I used to boost my ability to relate to other people, that I used to boost my ability to do work well and get good grades in school, that I used to boost my ability to sculpt and manage my body, to manage my health. And at a certain point, it flipped. And it was like, these things are getting in the way of my ability to practice meditation. So we tend to notice as we go along is that at first, what we find is that there's types of happiness that we can use our focus to enhance. And we can enhance our relationships with other people. It's good to do that. Enhancing them in a way that's balanced, in a way that's +1+1. And we can enhance our relationship with money such that we have the discipline. Okay, I'm making X number of dollars. I'm not going to go into debt to buy a Mercedes-Benz sports car. Right? Not going to go into debt to buy the really low-riding sports car. I'll buy a Toyota instead, which I can afford. And as a result, we become less touched by money. We become less touched by our job. But if we continue to look for ways in which we can find stability, ways in which we find happiness, what we find is that this path leads less and less outside and more inside. More and more to types of happiness that we can control, types of happiness that are more difficult to lose. So I gave this example yesterday. I tell these stories. Some of them will repeat for people who've heard them yesterday. But there was this time I was at this monastery, and the teacher there is a very well-known meditation teacher, but also very intimidating in some ways. So he has a question and answer period every single day at the monastery. And in the question and answer period, he doesn't just open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions? He has people sit in a circle, and then he stares at them. Like, you have a question? It's like really intimidating. He's got like these piercing eyes. So you have a question? He doesn't even say anything. He just looks like one person to another. Right? So it was going down the line in this way. And I noticed at the end of the line, there was this woman, and she was there with her husband and her child. And she looked really upset. I was going, what's she thinking? You know, what's the question that she has? So it goes one person, another person, another person. Finally, it came to her, and he kind of stared at her. Question. She said, you know, a mother's love for her child is supposed to be unconditional. And she said, the last time that I was at the monastery, she said, I felt a type of pure love that completely overpowers anything that I feel towards my child or I feel towards my husband. She was very guilty about this. It was like a bad mother because she had a stronger feeling than the love for her child. So what the teacher said was, well, first of all, if your child does something bad, you may find that your love for them is not unconditional. A mother's love is not unconditional. It changes. The second thing that he said was that basically you can get types of happiness from the mind itself that are far more satisfying than anything that you can experience externally. And this is another way that we create a sense of self, another way that we develop a sense of clinging that's higher, that's more stable than the types that we do externally. To people, to cars, to things, to opinions, we create that world, and the better that we get at creating the world, the more stable types of happiness that we look for. So this is a type of happiness that we can see in small increments when we come to meditate. So I mean, here we're not meditating together today, but you can notice that when you meditate, sometimes when you finish a session of meditation with a group or alone, you get up, and although it was difficult at the beginning, when you leave, you feel lighter. You feel unburdened. And the things of the world affect you less. The things that made you sad affect you less. The things that might make you elated can affect you less, but you feel a greater sense of peace within yourself. So this is a graph. This is a trend that one wants to notice and extrapolate from. And then take that feeling, take that cause, and make it more and more constant, more and more stable. And in doing so, our reality, the way in which we build our world, starts to change quite a lot from the reality of people around, from the reality that people would normally experience, in which their world is made real by their house. Their world is made real by their car. Their world is made real by their family, by people's opinions. It's here that they find footing. It's here that they place their weight. And it's here that they feel happiness or they feel suffering, depending on how these things change. So when we cultivate this sense of self, that's based on something like the breath, based on something like the cultivation of metta, based on something that's more under our control, in that way, we can start to say more and more, wherever I go, I really have who I am. I mean, it's not really who you are, but you can say it more and more because it's more stable. Actually, the personality changes depending on what people say to us. I mean, this guy is at the leadership conference and all of a sudden people start treating him like he's not a leader. Well, there goes your sense of self. There goes your who you are. Or you're a funny guy and people don't laugh at your jokes. You're not the funny guy anymore, right? If you're the popular man or woman, or the intelligent man or woman, the high status man or woman who's got the Benz, got the good job, got all of that, well, if you retire, what happened to that status? So we look for senses of self, senses of safety that are more and more stable. And if we cultivate this one, then if we lose the car, we lose the house, we gain the car, we gain the house, we still have this type of happiness, provided that we manipulate the world well. And these feed into each other. So when we let go of people, to a certain extent that's skillful. When we let go of our job, our house, where we place our weight on it, to a certain extent that's skillful, what it's like is like clearing a field. So you can imagine as if the mind is like a plot of land, and that plot of land has all these trees on it. If the trees are really, really, really tall, they grow really, really big. If you try to plant seeds in that plot of land, they might grow, but they're not going to grow the best, right? And you can't plant them where the trees already are. But if you cut down the trees and sunlight can get into that plot of land, where you plant the seeds, they have a chance to grow large. And where we rest our weight, what we cling to, what we build our sense of self on, is like these trees. So the paradox of happiness is that if we want a higher one, we have to let go of the lower one. We have to cut those trees in order to plant the seeds that we want to grow strong. Now, when we plant these seeds of meditation, these seeds of concentration, these seeds of happiness, that leads us to a sense of well-being that we don't have to give away. Other people cannot take it away. We can only lose it ourselves if we stop creating it. You can call this like the happiness of a producer versus the happiness of a consumer, right? A consumer, I remember this joke that one monk tells. He said, back in the day, we used to be citizens. You know, he's an older monk. He's like, we used to be citizens of a country. Now we're consumers. Like the main goal is like you're this big gaping mouth, right? They don't say like the citizens of, the consumers of Canada, the consumers of the United States, the consumers of Australia. So the happiness of a consumer relies on these things outside. We consume other people. We consume our car. We consume our house, and this is our food. Indian philosophy was concerned with this. Where does the sense of food come from, and where can we make it stable? Now, if instead of this, we develop the happiness of a producer by focusing on our meditation, this is a more stable source of food. It's food that's under our control. It's like if you got all your food and you put it in your neighbor's house. And then when you get hungry, you've got to knock on the door and they've got to give you the food. Instead, if you keep all the food in your house, you can eat it whenever you want. And this is, again, a more stable form of happiness, a more stable way of building our self. But it still is a self. It still is something that we create. And if we stop producing it, if we stop putting the causes into place, it falls away. It disappears. So people may notice this in their meditation. Kind of you develop some calm, some good feeling. You get excited, you rush out and jump into it. There it goes. And this is the drawback of these things. So the Buddha's phrase, his teachings about not self, are just not that the self is a mainstay. He has this phrase, sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe sankhara dukkha, but then he says, sabbe dhamma anattati. In other words, all conditioned things are not self. Or so all things are not self. All dhammas, but only all conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned things are dukkha. Now, the reason for this is because there is something that does not depend on conditions. There's something that's deathless, that is not born and doesn't die. So the Buddha says there is the unborn, there is the unformed, the uncreated. If there wasn't the unborn, the unformed, the unoriginated, the uncreated, there would be no escape from the born, the form, the created, the originated. But because there is this escape. Now, the more that we build our sense of self well, the more that we manage it well, the more that we come to see that what we're actually doing is creating our world. And in creating this world, it requires effort. And wherever there's effort, wherever there's creation, there needs to be maintenance. Right? We need to maintain our relationships with other people. And we need to maintain our money. We need to maintain our cars. We need to maintain our concentration. We need to maintain our virtue. We need to maintain the Dhamma in order for it to give us results. And because we need to maintain it, it means that it is not a stable source of happiness. This applies even to our practice of the Dhamma. So as we notice that we're clinging to these things, as we notice that we're feeding off of them, there's a choice that we can make when we're ready. Because our clinging is not just like picking up a clock. We cling to these things because we're addicted to them. Same way that I was addicted to marijuana. When we feed on it, we can't let it go because we like it. And because we like it, it can cause us to suffer. So when we notice how we're the agent behind all of this, that's when we can see that what we've been doing is out of ignorance. We create the world because we think we can control it. We create the world because we think it's stable. And when we realize that no matter how well we create it, it will never be something that we can maintain, then we search for a happiness that's even higher. We look for a happiness that doesn't have to be maintained. And getting this happiness does not proceed through a realization of ultimate reality. It proceeds through dispassion. It proceeds through a not wanting. It proceeds through a lack of desire to create anything at all. And that dispassion is followed by release. It's followed by freedom. Freedom from the need to create a sense of self. So nibbana is not self. All things are not self, but realizing them doesn't mean creating an ultimate reality. It means creating our world more and more skillfully, letting go of lower addictions to grab onto higher ones until we can let go of all addictions entirely. And where there's no need to create, there's no coming, there's no going, there's no staying still. And just this is the end of suffering. So we need to take on the Buddha's teachings on not self in the way that he intended, not as a description of an ontological reality, but as a tool that we use to stop our cravings, to stop our clingings, so that we build a higher and higher sense of self until we don't need to create a sense of self at all. Because there is the unborn, the unformed, the uncreated, the unoriginated. And just this Noble Eightfold Path, building better and better senses of self until we can let go of them all, is the path that leads us there. Okay, so I think I'll leave that for reflection. It's about 10:30. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
We'll just be alternating between the in-person and online.
Hi, I'm from Canada too.
Oh, are you?
As if you didn't know by my accent. Anyways, I wanted to you're talking about like right addiction, and I just want to have a disclosure right here. I have found Ajahn Sona's videos on YouTube, and I have become addicted to listening to them all day, except for when I'm working, and then at night when I'm going to sleep. So I just want to let you know I've actually, I'm kind of like a groupie. I don't know, it's really weird. Anyways, except for the snow part, I don't like the snow. What I wanted to say is that I'm also stuck in this phase of right effort.
Mm-hmm.
Right effort,
Mm-hmm.
like right, he wrote a book on right effort.
Okay.
Planting the seeds like a garden, and you're digging up the weeds and planting the good seeds and making sure as far as your spiritual practice goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, I'm kind of stuck in there, and I'm just like kind of wondering, like, when am I going to be unstuck with that and moving on further? Because I do meditation, I do a lot of chanting and all that kind of stuff, but I'm really stuck on just like doing the right thing all the time. So
Right.
that's it's my question.
Sure,
I don't
yeah.
think it has a really answer.
Well, yeah, Ajahn Sona was actually one of the monks at my ordination. So yeah, he was really funny. I've only met him that one time. There were only 5 monks. He was one of them.
Yeah.
And I still have really good memories of all the jokes, jokes that he told at that time. So basically, until you become an arahant, you will be putting forth effort of some kind in order to become an arahant, whether it's subtle or gross. And this is, again, is another important aspect of the Buddhist teachings. Sometimes people want to do something in which they're in emptiness, or they're using nibbana as an object, or whatever it might be. Wherever there's an intention, there's effort. And so however subtle the intention is, there's going to be effort involved in that. So you don't necessarily have to worry about, like, should I stop my effort? Worry about what you're addicted to that's causing you to suffer. And that's usually right in front of our face, right? So what is it that I'm doing that I want to stop doing, but have not been able to stop successfully so far? And then work on that. Through your meditation, use the additional concentration that you have through your meditation to work on these external things. And as a result, your meditation can become more and more of a mainstay for you because you're using it to manage your life. It has to flow out in that way. And so as your meditation becomes more and more of a mainstay, then you can develop states of concentration, just even at your work or even walking down the street. And this is another additional tool that you have. But ultimately, these things, again, the metaphor of a seed and a garden is one that the Buddha gives, and I guess Ajahn Sona wrote a book on it. I haven't read the book, but it sounds like a good one. Yeah, and if you are planting a seed and you water the seed, you can't make that seed grow faster than it does by pulling on it, or by watering it extra, or by tilling the soil extra. So it's not really productive, actually, to worry about when it will bear fruit. You worry about whether you're putting the correct conditions into place for that seed to germinate, grow, and bear fruit, because that's your responsibility. So in the same way, becoming anxious about whether, I'm not saying that, here we use the word uddhacca kukucca even for very subtle states, like subtle states of worry or subtle states of remorse, like I don't have this or I have this. You can see this in the canon. With Venerable Anuruddha, he hadn't attained arahantship, and he said, I still haven't attained arahantship, but I have all this effort. And Venerable Sariputta says, that's your restlessness and remorse. You worry that you haven't attained arahantship. So being concerned about when to let go of effort, one has to recognize that is an aspect of the mind that's connected with uddhacca kukucca. And it has to be held in balance. We want to attain arahantship, but if we become worried about attaining it, then it's flipping over into a place in which we will be blocked in our meditation. So what you want to place your desires on, instead of having the weight of them too much on the end goal, is place them on managing the conditions well. Because managing these conditions well is what allows the plant to grow. And when it grows, it'll bear fruit in its own time. But you have to manage the conditions very subtly up until that time. So dispassion develops through our investigation into what it is that makes us happy. And there comes a point which these things build. Our desire for something better builds to its greater than our desire for life. And our fear of suffering builds to its greater than our fear of death. And that is when the mind is ready to take a step beyond both life and death. And you can't force it to get there. It has to get there by searching out everything that you cling to in life, because that's the same thing as death. So it's actually quite profound what the Buddha is leading us towards. Life and death are part of one reality that we cling to. And there's another paradox there, that if we want to be happy, we have to be able to take a step beyond the both. So just manage the conditions well, manage your happiness well, become more and more of a connoisseur of what it is that makes you happy and makes you suffer. And then when the mind is ready, it will be able to let go of everything in samsara, both life and death, to step into something that's beyond them both. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante. We have an online question. Bhante, you talked a bit about how our happiness and suffering come from our entanglements to other people. Just in case, is that the meaning of being unyoked, or visamyogaya, one of the characteristics for recognizing the Dhamma that the Buddha taught to his stepmother? Or would that disentanglement fit better under the Dhamma's characteristic of seclusion?
Right, so a Pali categorization. So my full disclosure, I'm not an expert Pali scholar. I mean, I studied it for a couple of years actually, but there was one time my Pali teacher, he asked me, he said, what's the meaning of nisaraniya? He just asked me out of the blue, and I couldn't answer him. He got really disappointed. He's like, you should learn Pali better. Like, I kind of know the grammar, but I actually don't know the words very well. So one of the things with the Buddha's teachings is that, again, we have to approach his teachings in the Pali Canon not from the mentality of a Western classification system, but from the mentality of the Asian classification system. So oftentimes the Buddha would use a word, and that word carried more than one meaning. I mean, even the epithet for the Buddha, Tathagata, it can mean both thus come or thus gone. So, I mean, as a Westerner, what you're going to be is it thus come or thus gone? You're going to like start a fight over that, right? But I mean, if you're a Buddhist practitioner, it can mean both thus come. I mean, an arahant's experience is that it's just this, you know? They've let go of their attachments to things and they experience things as just this without proliferation. Or it can be thus gone. They're well gone from the world. It's both. So in terms of classifying a word like being unentangled, it's not necessarily something that one wants to pursue, whether to fit it into box A or box B. One wants to look at it as a quality which can encompass many aspects of the Buddha's teachings. So the Buddha, for example, has said that his teachings are deep in their meaning, and you can take like even a single 4-line gatha and practice that from the lowest levels to the highest. So being unentangled can apply on the level of relationships. You become unentangled from the relationships that you have that are not +1 in the way that the Buddha recommended. You become unentangled from your relationship to money in the sense that you desire external things so much you go into debt. And now people have leverage over you. Your job has leverage over you. You're afraid of missing a payment. So you become unentangled from those things. You become unentangled from the world at large when you can find safer places to rest. And safer places to rest inside these external things. You become completely unentangled when you become unentangled from everything, including the Dhamma. So this is a word that could have multiple layers of meaning, and it's best to interpret the Buddha's teachings in that way. They generally have many shades of meaning that can start from you might say the most gross and extend into the most subtle all the way to Nibbana. So I would take this word to have that same breadth of meaning. Yeah. Yeah.
We've both got time.
Thank you for excellent discourse, Bhante. You said how the self is created in the worldview level up to the realization of non-self. We are all born with a view of, we are here because of view of self. That's why we are here. And we interact with you said that the personality is formed by your habits, your connections, your possessions, and then you interact with your mother, you have a different personality, you are with your boss, a different personality. So even at that level, you can see yourself is changing, not permanent. It is changing. So even at that level, we can see there's no permanent self. Then also, if I see somebody, I create that person with my memory, and at that time only I create that person as a personality, and I create myself with respect to that person. Then I see another person, another memories come, then I create another self with respect to that personality. So that is how I see this, how personalities of self is formed, and it's changing by looking out and looking in all the time. And until you, of course, get to the state that you get to Sakkaya-ditthi, then you have a better stable view of non-self. That's how I see how we interact with the world and play with the view of self.
Yeah, so in terms of the way that a sense of self is created by a feedback mechanism, which goes from outwards to inwards and back outwards again and becomes more and more real, that definitely does seem to be a way that people can create their sense of self and sense of reality. One of the things in the Buddhist teachings, though, is that this is not leading to a realization of no self. So we don't eliminate Sakkaya-ditthi through a realization of like an ultimate reality of no self. It comes from the giving up of our addictions to samsara. So essentially, we come back and get reborn in samsara because we think it's worthwhile. One of the reasons we think it's worthwhile is because we think there's something in there that's really worth holding on to. So our sense of who we are is bound up with our addiction to birth and death. We're addicted to dying. We're addicted to being born. So the elimination of that addiction is not a realization like, I have no self. It's the ending of an addiction. And as a result of the ending of that addiction, there's serious consequences in the mind. This applies even all the way up to Nibbana. When a person attains Nibbana, it's not that they realize there's no self, like in an ontological sense. The Buddha has a teaching on Anidasana Vijnana, which is very difficult to explain away in the commentaries. And there's one time he gets into this argument with a Brahma. The Brahma says, I'm going to disappear from you. You can't disappear from the Buddha. The Buddha says, I'm going to disappear from you. And he disappears from the Brahma. Then he gives this teaching on Anidasana Vijnana. He says, Anidasana Vijnana is basically consciousness without surface. It's not known through the earthness of earth, the wateriness of water, the fieriness of fire, the airiness of air, the allness of the all. So in other words, he's describing a type of consciousness which does not partake of anything in samsara, but he, the Buddha, still classifies it as a type of consciousness. Now, when you look at the words, the epithets for the end goal, one of them is Nibbana. There's other ones like the harbor. One of them is Anidasana. It gets translated in different ways. So the Buddha gives this simile of a beam of light coming through a window. A beam of light comes through a window, it lands on a wall. So ask the monks, if a beam of light comes through a window into a house, essentially, where does it land? It lands on a wall. If it doesn't land on the wall, where does it land? It lands on the ground. If it doesn't land on the ground, where does it land? It lands on the water. In those days, they believed that water, the earth was supported by water. If it doesn't land on the water, where does it land? It doesn't land. So in other words, when consciousness is not established on a support, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily you're eliminated or that you realize there's no self, nothing permanent in the world. Nibbana is permanent. That's one of its epithets, but it's not self because the self is something we create. If something is uncreated, then there is no self in that, as the Buddha defines it. So that's something that's really important to know. We're not trying to come to an ontological realization that we don't exist and it's all just this complete changing process of conditions. That would be looking at the Buddha's teachings through the lens of the I, which is what they started to do in the centuries past the Buddha, which is why we have this really complicated Abhidhamma. The Abhidhamma was like really small in the Buddha's time. It was like this super complicated thing. It explains everything in the world. And why we have these commentaries that are like almost the same length as the canon. People wanted to know more and more what the gaps in the Buddha's teachings were leaving out. And as a result, they speculated. So we want to look at the Buddha's teachings through the lens of how we consume and how we're addicted. and use his teachings on not self for that purpose. And if we do use them for that purpose, the penultimate level is that we turn that teaching on not self even to the sense of identity that we've built as a practitioner, as somebody who likes the Buddha's teachings. And beyond that is what's unborn, what's uncreated, what's unoriginated. We're born, we're created, we're originated because of what we cling to. That's why we have a sense of self. And if we stop that clinging, then there is no creation of the sense of self. But it doesn't mean we're eliminated. So that's an important thing to understand, because if we approach the practice in this way, then it can lead us onwards and lead us beyond. If we approach it as trying to realize that there's no self, that attempt to realize that becomes another state of clinging.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
That's very loud. That was a incredible talk.
I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you very much. And we're very grateful for you to come and offer us this talk today, and also for Tina and everyone at the Metta Centre for bringing you to Australia, and I'm really grateful for the partnership that we have with the Metta Centre.
It's been really great to be here. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of announcements, Bhante, is Langdon, can you just turn that volume down? It's really loud for me. A big thank you to the City Zen and Katana Organising Committee for their outstanding work in running last Sunday's event. For anyone who was there, it was pretty challenging weather conditions that we were dealing with. There was a lot of movement of the event just to make things happen and comfortable for everyone. So really grateful for everyone and the volunteers that came. It was really an army of volunteers that sort of put that together. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that. For today, we've got two things happening after lunch. So we've got the we've got the monthly lay discussion, and that'll be happening at 12:30, isn't it? It's written 1:30. It's 12:30 in the library upstairs for about an hour, and that's led by Dr. Jaya and Satish Wimalajiva. And also, because last week was the last Sunday of the month and we had a robe offering ceremony at Newbury, we missed the Kalyana Mitra cleaning day, so because of that, anyone who's around here, you will see that the grass has just gone absolutely crazy with the spring weather. So if you are able to stay, we'd really appreciate you being able to help out. That kicks off around 12:15 and goes for about an hour or so. And then just to thank you also to our City Zen group for their help with organising the event last week, as well as all of the volunteers that came along for that. So a couple of things with upcoming retreats now that the bus is over. So over at Newbury, over at the retreat centre, we've got a weekend retreat with Pip Ramson. That's on between the 5th and the 7th of December. There's a 6-day retreat with Ajahn Viradhammo on the 2nd to the 7th of January, and also from the 23rd to the 26th of January, which is the Australia Day weekend, Ajahn Mudita will be here again, and he'll be offering a retreat there, and that'll be opening up in December. Bookings for these, you can see them. If you want bookings for those, haven't opened as yet, but you should be able to see that stuff on our website as well as on our newsletter soon. So this week's teaching program. So tomorrow night, Bhante, you could be offering Bhante Joe will be giving the guided meditation at 7:30, and then Tuesday night our lay person-led meditation happens at 7:30 here in the centre, and then Monday to Thursday nights for anyone at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. There's Make Meditation a Healthy Habit. These are 20-minute monastic-led sits twice per week, guided meditations on Discord, and then New Day, New Mind, which has been running for close to 2 years now. Which is a daily meditation group which you can join any time between 4 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. Melbourne time on Discord. So next week's teaching program, on Sunday, we've got Ajahn Aranavihari, and then Monday night again, we've got Ajahn Aranavihari. And then just a note here that there will be no monastics at the Buddhaloka Centre from Tuesday the 4th of November after the Dana with Bhante Joe, after he departs until Ajahn Sadhara is back on Wednesday the 12th of November. Ajahn's away in the US at the moment. And that's it for announcements. Thank you very much, Bhante. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry. One more announcement. Sorry.
Next week on Saturday, Citizen is doing a working bee at Sunim's temple, starting at 9:30. So we'll be doing a working bee in the morning, a lunch dana and a Dhamma talk, and a meditation in the afternoon. So if you'd like to come along, please do.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. And please, everyone, after we finish, please join us next door for the lunch dana and the Pinnapada. I'll leave it to you to close the session, Bhante.
To do Arahang, is that usually? Yeah, okay. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Bhagavantaṃ Abhivādemi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammaṃ Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghaṃ Namami. So lunch.